Hello learners, I hope you're keeping well, finding the sessions interesting and useful. I'm Ajit K. Mishra and I'm here again with another session on emotional well-being. Emotional well-being is a combination of emotional awareness and emotional regulation. So being aware is not enough. Being aware makes us capable of recognizing and describing our emotions and the emotions of others. It can also help us forecast or predict our emotions in the future, but it will not help us with emotional regulation or emotional management. So emotional regulation is the other vital aspect of emotional well-being along with emotional awareness. So if emotional awareness and emotional regulation are explored, are developed in an adequate quantity, then we can ensure emotional well-being for us. So emotional regulation is generally used to describe a person's ability to effectively manage and respond to an emotional experience. So for example, an emotional experience has happened. Now I cannot avoid it. It has happened and that's a reality. So if I know how to manage that particular situation, that particular emotional experience, that'll be great. Similarly, if I know how to respond to an emotional experience in a proper manner, in a wise manner, that will also ensure my emotional well-being. A greater awareness of emotional regulation will help us not only cope with the challenges caused by any emotional experience or disturbing emotional experience, but also manage those experiences very, very well. So when it comes to manage those emotions properly or adequately, we can think of three things. Let's take a look at each of these things. So we can think of initiating actions triggered by certain emotions. So there are certain actions that are generally triggered by certain emotions. If we initiate those actions that are triggered by certain emotions, it will be good for us. For example, it can be an emotional experience of anger in your workplace where suddenly the supervisor or the HR manager says that you're not at all doing well, you have to do well, otherwise you'll get a pay cut instead of getting a pay hike. So that will suddenly create a couple of emotions in us. So that will lead to the initiation of certain actions in you, because that particular statement will create either a sense of fear, losing a pay hike, or a sense of anger, thinking that despite doing so much, your management is not happy with you. So it can either be anger or it can be fear. Either ways, you need to initiate certain actions so that you overcome that challenge. So we all do that whenever we are faced with a demanding situation or challenging situation. We generally find ways. We have to find ways. That is the only way out. So we can think of we can experience either anger or fear, and then we decide what kind of actions we need to initiate in order to overcome either of these two emotions or both of them. So we initiate certain actions that are triggered by emotions. Secondly, inhibiting actions that are triggered by emotions. There are other emotional situations where certain emotions trigger certain actions in us. And those actions are generally sudden, unplanned, and whimsical, impulsive. So that's exactly when we need to understand that those impulsive actions can lead to strained relationships, can lead to disaster for us. So we need to learn how to inhibit those actions. Going back to the first example where your HR manager calls you and tells you that your performance has not been satisfactory, you're not doing well, therefore you're not going to get a pay hike. Instead, you're going to get a pay cut. So that can promptly lead to an angry emotion in you. So if you suddenly become angry and you suddenly behave impulsively, you pick something, you pick the coffee mug in the table and then you suddenly throw it at the HR manager. Just imagine what is going to happen. You're not going to get a pay cut, you're going to be fired. So there are certain situations when we need to inhibit our actions triggered by certain kinds of emotions. So that will mean that we are emotionally more literate and we are emotionally wise and we can regulate, check, control our emotions at that particular time, and thereafter we can think about it, thereafter we can devise better ways, intelligent ways to overcome that particular problem. Now, third strategy is modulating responses triggered by emotions. There are certain responses that that need to be modulated when it comes to manage an emotional situation. So there are various emotions that trigger various kinds of emotions in us. We can think of modulating responses during those occasions or situations where we can overcome certain problems. For example, take the same case where the HR manager says the same things to you and you're feeling very angry or you're very scared, you're very nervous. That's the situation where you can think of not only initiating an action, you are going to do that, not only inhibiting an action, of course, that's very essential. At the same time, we can think of modulating our action in response to an emotion triggered by an external situation. For example, that's exactly where you can have or initiate a discussion with the HR manager to know how does the management perceive or evaluate the performance of an employee, what other things the management is looking forward to or looking for, and how else I can do in order to convince the management of my capabilities and thus earn a pay hike. So the emotion of anger, the emotion of fear can be subsided and can be modulated in order to present yourself in a better manner so that it leads to a dialogue and it leads to some kind of resolution. That brings us to a very important question related to emotional regulation. How else can we regulate our emotions? It's very important that we regulate our emotions. So let's take a look at the process model of emotional regulation developed by Gross and Thompson. Gross believes that emotions can be modulated or changed, and modulation is what determines the final emotional response. I just talked about modulation, how it actually determines the final emotional response. Are you going to behave in a very angry manner? Are you going to show your nervousness? Are you going to show that you're neither nervous nor angry, you're emotionally poised, you'd like to take the dialogue forward and you'd like to know how else you can improve your performance. So emotion regulation concerns this modulation of emotion in order to alter what emotions are experienced as well as when and how they are experienced. So they can substantially, considerably alter the emotions that are being experienced at a particular point in time. So let's take a look at this process model. The process model of emotion or emotional regulation. Start. The process model of emotional regulation, pioneered by Grass, details 5 major points of focus during the emotional regulation process. The first is situation selection. The second is situation modification. The third is attentional deployment. The fourth is cognitive change. And the fifth is response modification. So let's take a look at each of these stages. We can use them in order to improve our emotional regulation strategies or skills. So there are certain situations, and those situations can be selected by us. And those situations can also be modified by us, because those situations will certainly generate some kind of emotional response in us. Let's take an example. You have been invited to a party where your ex-girlfriend with her current boyfriend has also been invited. So what would you do? You're going to select the situation, because this is a situation that might cause some kind of anxiety, some kind of anger, some kind of strong emotional response in you. So what are you going to do? You're going to select the situation. That means you'll start with situation selection. Would you go to the party? That's one option. And the other option is you won't go to the party because you think that if you go to the party, it might lead to some emotional issues there, and that will lead to problems. So you may not decide to go to the party. That is one option. But then, if it is a business party where your presence is highly solicited, what are you going to do? You have to go to the party then. So you'll decide to go to the party. And then you will come to the next stage, that is situation modification. Now you go to the party, you cannot avoid it. So you are in that particular situation now. Before that, you were in a situation that was not the party. It is an antecedent, focused situation. Okay? So you come to the party now. You can now modify the situation. How? So you can decide not to talk to your ex, not to meet your ex, not to come in touch with your ex during the entire party. Or you can decide to have a small talk with your ex. You can say, hello, how are you doing? That's all. Or you can decide not to talk to your ex. So you can actually modify the situation accordingly. If you decide not to talk to your ex, you'll be doing things which will not lead to any contact between you and your ex. Or if you decide to talk to your ex, you can look forward to a situation where you suddenly come across your ex and say hello and how you doing. Fine, that's all. That brings us to the next stage, that is attentional deployment stage. So now we are going to deploy our attention. So what I can either, if I decide to have a small talk with the ex, and then I can think of having a small talk with the ex, and thereafter going off and then looking at something that is not related to the ex. So we can do that. For example, we can watch singers performing or musicians performing at the party. We can watch dancers giving a performance, anything else. So we can just deploy our attention on something that will not be related with the X. That's one option. The other option is we can watch our X flirting with the current view. That can be the other attentional deployment option. So if you deploy your attention in the second manner, that means you begin to watch your X flirting with the current view, that can lead to two very important things. And that will be the stage of the cognitive change. For example, you see that the new partner is very handsome, dashing than you are. The new partner is better than you are. And then you have the other option, the other perspective. You'll feel good to see that your ex is quite comfortable, quite happy in the company of the new view. So you'll be happy about it. So this stage is called the cognitive change stage. So if you see that the new partner, the new partner is giving more attention to your ex, and your ex is quite comfortable in the company of the new partner, they are going or getting along nicely. That can lead to some problems. Problems like, it can lead to some disturbing emotions. It can lead to jealousy, anger, then other disturbing emotions. But then it can also lead to something positive. And that's what is called a cognitive change or reappraisal, where you say, fine, we didn't get along well, but my ex is quite happy with her new view, and they are getting along nicely, and they are comfortable with each other. So we can feel quite happy. So that will be the reappraisal stage, and see how emotion is being regulated, either positively or negatively. If it is negatively regulated, it will lead to problems for you only, nobody else. So you'll feel jealous, envious, angry, frustrated, all kinds of negative emotions will visit you. So if you adopt the reappraisal strategy, it can lead to some kind of positive feeling in you. And then we come to the response stage. Again, it's a very, very important thing. So the response stage can actually be taken care of in two different ways. If you're feeling jealous, it can lead to drinking heavily in the party, and then you will not be able to suppress your strong emotions. You will not be able to modulate your response. So if you think of modulating your response, you can think of that cognitive change, and that is how it will happen. So you can think of suppressing your strong emotions. That will be the response modulation from you. It can either come out in the form of heavy drinking and creating a scene in the party, or it will be promptly suppressed because you have gone through that cognitive change, the reappraisal stage, where you accept that the ex has every right to be happy with the new view. So you are accepting that, so you will not have any problems at all. So your emotional state will be quite calm and comfortable. It will not lead to any disturbing emotions. So that way we understand how our emotions can be regulated. So what I mean to say is, emotional regulation is as important as emotional awareness. Together, they actually determine the level of our emotional well-being. So in order to ensure or determine our emotional well-being, it's very, very important that we take care of these three things: emotions, emotional awareness, and emotional regulation. I'm sure you have taken note of all these things, and you're going to explore these things yet further when I meet you The next time with a new session, I'll be talking about another type of well-being, that is social well-being. So until then, it is bye-bye.